Okay, in this podcast, we're going to be talking about taking the approach of both the cities of Kenosha and Portland, as well as other cities that we've seen across the board, and we're going to approach it. Let's see if there's any balance out. Okay, and approaching it as uh, a way that libertarians would actually approach foreign policy. And this would be, we're going to look at these as essentially autonomous zones, and as we should when we're looking at the levels of federalization, and where each level of jurisdiction should fall down lower, and also in how people should treat each and other community that they enter, that they should actually respect the community that they're entering as well. And it's a little bit interesting using this approach with it, because it's going to take people a lot of this out of this realm of is this who's allowed to protest and all this other stuff of all these other things, and is there anything of any nature of self-defense or not, because all these issues would have to be taken completely out, because it would be who would be allowed to be there by uh, the standards of invitation only. And when we start to view this of these two things with it, we would see that the only people that would be allowed to be there are people who would have been invited by either the sheriff and chief of police, not the police officers themselves, because they merely had been involved in criminal activity before with the shooting of another person. They themselves would want a diversion. This would actually have to be through that action. Now, this action can only come through deputizing other people, and even if they're out of the community, they can be deputized as well. And there is no legal standpoint at which what age someone can be deputized as well. And that would be what would be allowed. That was number one. Number two, it would be someone that could actually be hired as security. You could be hired as security from any type of point across the country, or even from a foreign country. You can be hired as security for any individual company or individual person. That's number two. And number three, it would be any people that were actually directly invited in by the actual family, of the victims. Now, when we start to look at these three groups, we actually see that no one was actually deputized to actually aid in security. What we've actually found is that the governor was actually overriding any type of local initiatives with it, but it was still through federalization, but it was still accepted in by the local mayor. So this could essentially be accepted in as the grounds for bringing in the National Guard. The National Guards could be activated without any type of executive authority, despite what President Trump wants to think. President Trump's actions did not have anything to do with the National Guard. This is one of the things with it which I think the media needs to call him out on, is the National Guard had nothing to do with him. The only thing that had to do with him was Homeland Security and all the other officials like the FBI being able to snag people off the streets, in which they have, and it's actually caused skyrocketing in areas such as Portland. We'll talk about that a little bit. Portland and New York City and a couple of other cities such as like DC. We'll talk about that a little bit later in this, but we'll talk. But right now, we're just going to go focus on one little point, being Kenosha, because it's pretty isolated, which we can kind of talk about it, because there's not too many people involved in it as of right now. It doesn't get very, very difficult to talk about all the parties involved, because there aren't a horribly high number. you have basically Rittenhouse, you have the other pro-Trumpers, you have they were going against them. You have Antifa, you have Black Lives Matter, you have the family, you have the cops, you have the sheriff's department, you have the mayor, uh, and then you have the community of the people of Kenosha, and then you have the community of the people of Racine above that are trying to aid financially in the rebuilding of Kenosha as well. That's basically the parties that are involved, as well as the media as well, that have tried to interject themselves. And you have the on all sides with it, as well as the as well in both local and national. You also have the political parties as well that have tried to interject themselves as well. On top of that, being the Democrats and Republicans have tried to really capitalize on it. So there aren't horribly, when it gets down to very, very insane in which to follow, because there's even more parties than that. And when we start to dig into that, that's even worse. Now, when we view the idea of this libertarian idea on foreign policy, it should basically be that either the mayor, the commissioner for police, or the sheriff for the county should have had to invite someone in on that behalf. Now, none of that happened before when it comes to security, other than when we see the National Guard being done on behalf of the governor, in which they approved of it. They did not they did not oppose of it, which means this would have been fully approved. Now, while I don't agree with it, this is what was approved. Now, on the idea of everyone else. Now, the fact is every other party that's involved there is not wanted. Neither political parties were wanted there. When it comes down to all that media intervention, none of them were actually requested. Obviously, the only people that I would say that should be allowed there is for any coverage is local media. Everybody else is national media can just get the hell out. Even independent national media, get the hell out. And when it comes down to it, is you can have the when it comes down to it, we can see with the stuff we get out as well with it, because they've actually interjected themselves as well, and frankly, we don't need it in the region, and because that's more intervention within the actual thing, causing more turmoil, and they were not invited into the actual situation, which is making the situation much worse. This would this is where you get situations in which you get a small conflict like the Syrian civil war started out as, and then boiling down to where the Syrian civil war became when multiple parties started to intervene in it, and you have over 100,000 people dead, or probably much higher than that, as far as I know with it. I mean, if we look at the death toll, let me see what we have. 185,000 people. Yeah, so we're talking is roughly about 400 to 500,000 people with it dead from that. And that's from when you get all these people involved. And you look at all the thing is beyond Syria, and it's and the actual parties that are directly there with or invited, you're talking that's you're talking which would have been the Syrian opposition and Syria, Hezbollah, and Russia, and then the Syrian opposition, and then obviously ISIL, which was actually created through all of our intervention down in Libya and are going into Iraq, which actually came through there. So beyond that is we basically we basically have that was basically the ones that were invited, or they were actually coming through in an insurgency on that. Now we have the ones who were not invited. We have Turkey, we have the U.S., we have France, we have Jordan, we have the United Kingdom, as well as certain other ones as well. Uh, and what we end up seeing is, as well as uh, we see areas like it was something that was could have been easily avoided if these other countries did not get involved, and it could have been stopped immediately. And this is something which we can actually copy in our own country itself. And when we stay out of these conflicts, basically everybody wants to intervene, needs to stay out of it. Basically, these things can be resolved. Many of these police shootings in the past have been easily resolved in most often weeks without all of this burning down the cities and shooting protesters. We're talking on both sides with it, so we don't need any of this stuff with it. And then when you start to go out to the situation out in, like, let's say Portland, you're starting to add a lot more of these start insane groups, such as like Patriot Prayer, which is another insane group. They're ones that basically have gone in and created more conflict, actually following around Antifa, and they've followed around and created more conflict. Now, the very a very sane solution. And if we bring down these things and start saying nobody else except who's directly involved should be in these communities trying to sort the problems out, it can really solve much of what's going on. And I think this is something in which everybody should be able to go along and agree with, because we don't need agitators on any side of the argument. And this is something which we should all be willing to agree with. We have agitators on all sides of the argument that have actually tried to gain political favor and try to run on this politically. And this has made things worse when you start to go out to Portland, out to DC, out to Chicago, and many areas abroad, many areas along the whole country. You can actually see that it's gotten worse, and we see that people have been fighting on all sides. And we frankly don't need that. And if we want a solution for peace, we should actually find one in which from other communities that are basically trying to rile everyone up. And these agitators aren't necessary for finding an actual solution. And this is what's ratcheting up the mob violence. And if we look toward what Rand Paul wants for a solution, it's the only way it's going to occur is if both sides stay out of these conflicts and if they stop making politics out of the whole thing. Because it's not about winning points, it's about trying to preserve life and preserve these communities so they can actually grow and prosper again. And I think we need to realize this. And we need to actually get beyond all of this garbage of trying to kill each other. Let the communities themselves make their own decisions. If you're not invited into the community to actually solve the problem, get out. Frankly, get out. Because unless you're one of these ones that's actually directly invited by a actual official or by the actual people who are directly harmed, stay the hell out. Because frankly, all you're doing is agitating the whole situation. And like when Trump tried to say, oh, he protected Kenosha from the National Guard, has always been there because the National Guard acts within the state. That's number one. Number two is you look at the areas that they were trying to portray. The areas they were trying to portray were areas that were already burnt down to the ground. And these were areas that were destroyed. Trump did nothing, and actually Trump himself has actually done nothing himself. He's actually caused more conflict just like the people in Antifa and Black Lives Matter have actually caused more conflict going city to city. Both sides are completely in the wrong. And instead of preaching sanity, they're preaching ratchet up the violence. And this is where, if you want a sane solution, you need to end the mob violence on both sides. You don't need people harassing each other and going from either side. And I've seen solutions saying, "Oh, but Trump only inherited all of this mob violence." Well, you don't need to continue it, and you don't need to validate people on the other side doing the same thing right back. Because the fact is we need to actually act with actual dignity. We actually believe in liberty and believe in some type of dignity that don't even belong there. We're gonna have people jumping in trying to shoot people that actually do not actually live in the community. And then we have much more turmoil, and the cops have to deal with that before they can solve anything else. And if the cops are if the cops are just trying to cover themselves with it, the union's going to say how great they're saying protecting the community with it when it was never that case. Now, in the case of Rittenhouse, we know that he had only intentions, via his words, to use lethal force. He had no intentions to use non-lethal force. These are via his words. When we look in the case out in Portland, we know that Patriot Prayer does not want to. This is the one who lost an actual person who got killed. They do not want to want to actually be looking for a peaceful solution. Their whole thing is antagonized, and what ends up happening is many times you're going to end up having people getting killed when you do this, when there's high tensions, specifically during this era where we have everything locked down. When you have everything locked down, people are going to die because the fact is there's high tensions, and we need to start realizing this. Now, now if people start talking sanely and realize we need to stop all of this and get back to sanity, we're not going to end some of this. I've seen a lot of things of people that would normally support liberty that are buying into this idea of rejecting the 10th Amendment because they want to go after Antifa and Black Lives Matter because they don't like that group. Well, the fact is you can use the same argument against these fake patriot groups that are trying to harass Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and use the same argument of saying basically snag them off the streets and put them in a wagon and carry them off with the FBI and Homeland Security and charge. And this is basically what we're going to see occur if we basically say to the hell with the 10th Amendment. And we're seeing this but if you actually get to a point of saying own community, because we're seeing all these communities, we're seeing Seattle torn apart, we're seeing Portland torn apart, we're seeing Washington, D.C. torn apart, we're seeing Kenosha torn apart, we're seeing Chicago torn apart, we're seeing New York City torn apart, and it's all for the same reason, is you have two groups, basically roughly two groups that are fighting each other from, I shouldn't say two groups, but two spectrums. They're actually fighting against each other, trying to kill each other, and neither of them actually believe in liberty. One feigns liberty. The other one supports. Forms of Marxism. And the fact is what you're going to get is you're going to get tyranny from either group. And they're basically supporting insanity. And this is why I do not support either side doing this. Now, we take this sane groups, let them the hell out of the area, and then when it comes down to the last one being anyone that's invited is fine to stay. But if you're not actually really realistically invited, you need to go. And the fact is because we're sitting right now in Kenosha with our actual guidelines of curfew because of this. And it's because of these antagonizers on both sides and people trying to make it a political issue. And it needs to end. And I guarantee that the same thing's existing in all these other cities because of these people that want to kill each other. when the normal citizens just want to continue living their lives and moving on. And they can't because people want to kill each other. Now I'm going to end it here with it. I'm probably going to do one more video today. But that's about it. If people are interested, they can donate to my Patreon at patreon.com/challengehistory. That's about it, and bye everyone.